Hello and welcome to the live stream. I hope that my voice will hold up for the whole of this conversation. I have literally, like 3 hours ago, finished recording the audio narration for Keeper of the Gate, which is the fourth book in Sangwheel Chronicles and the final one in that series. So, yay, cue the applause. I am series complete, which is very nice. So I've been talking nonstop into a microphone for about 20 hours in the process of recording it. Um, Today we are talking about technologies. We're talking about technologies that every world builder should know about, and the importance of thinking about it. And we are certainly going to be talking about wheels and water wheels and that kind of thing as well. Okay, so uh, hi Tony, good to see you. Yeah, so I'm gonna kick off by talking about that. Why did I change the channel icon? Okay, so I changed the channel icon because the channel's now at a fairly big point, and so I worked a little bit with a marketer, and they were like, "Your icon's very basic, and you should have like a more, gleamy icon." So um, they did some concept art for me. I then took that to an illustrator, and illustrator did the illustration, and now we have a new channel icon. So yeah, it's all just basically marketing stuff, but I am really pleased with how the icon turned out. So there is that. I hope you all like it too. um Okay, so technologies a world builder should think about. The first one, the one where you always have to start, is what is the degree of control over fire that your people have? Now, it doesn't have to be fire, right? It can be anything that is kind of like the equivalent in terms of an energy source. But the thing is, for our species here on Earth, everything changed with fire. Fire was the reason why we could work late into the night. Fire was how we kept animals at bay, other animals at bay. Fire was how we cooked food, which unlocked better calories, which allowed us to preserve food, which reduced chewing time on foods, which gave us a wider eating range. So fire really changed almost everything about us. So what is your world's equivalent of fire? And is it fire? But fire doesn't just stop with people have it or they don't, because different degrees of control over fire, from basically making a fire all the way to lasers, right, is basically like heat energy. And it starts out with, you can make a fire. How hard is it to make a fire? There's a great book. Well, no, I lie. It's not a great book. It's a very interesting book, but there's an interesting book called The Quest for Fire. It might be better if you read it in French, but I don't read French, so I read the English translation, which was shaky, but it was really, really interesting in terms of, it was these cave people who lost their fire, and they were carrying fire around as like a coal in a roc's horn. And then when the fire goes out, one of them has to go on a quest to find more fire, because they have no reliable means of starting the fire, right? So at that point, they had kind of control over fire. They could tame it, but they couldn't reliably start it. And that I thought was very interesting. So yeah, how do you start it? How hard is it to start, and so on? And then, of course, as David says in the chat, from fire came the forge. Like, you need different degrees of control over fire for different types of metal, like steel, bronze, brass. You need a really hot fire for steel. You need a different kind of fire for glass. Fire makes ceramics easier as well. Like, it makes drying ceramics is part of the whole fire process. So fire is so deeply influential on your technologies. It is well worth thinking about how your people control fire, make fire, and the heat to which they can raise it, which is predominantly at the beginning anyway, an attribute of the fuel that they use. And of course, your magic, right? I mean, there's always your magic as well. Okay, so fire is great, but it's surely not the only one. All right, so there is, of course, agriculture itself. So, and I've spoken about agriculture plenty, so I'm not going to hammer on it here. But basically, agriculture changes everything. And by agriculture, I mean the whole farming thing. I mean, domesticating meat animals, planting grains, that kind of entire approach. Because agriculture allows people to specialize into niche areas. So, and without with your hunter gatherer societies, you don't have that specialization, and without that specialization, it becomes really hard to reach the technology advancements of like people studying and building upon generation of technological advancements. So agriculture really does change a lot. But let's talk about the wheel, because the wheel is interesting. Okay, so the wheel was probably first not invented for a cart. The wheel was probably first invented, I think, for pottery, or perhaps for spinning, one of those two. And then it was adapted for transportation. This is speculation, right? This is speculation based on archaeological records. But I believe that it was actually first used. A wheel was first used for like the creation of it was either pottery or spinning, and then it became adapted for the cart. But of course, the wheel changed so much, because without the wheel, your carts are stuck on like a sled approach, right? And a sled, you can only go so far. I mean, it just is not that much of an option. And with wheels comes what Maths Reading Corner told us right at the beginning of this live stream: water wheels. Okay, and water wheels give you a lot, because water wheels is the start of your automation process. All right, so let's talk about the importance of understanding the level of automation in your world. So, at the beginning of your people's journey in agriculture and in whatever, right? Even if you keep them nomadic and they still keep building, everything has to be done by hand. Okay. So if you think about a pair of jeans, there is somewhere upwards of 5,000 threads of cotton in a pair of jeans. For one person to spin that many threads by hand would require them to spin, I think, for like a year's worth of labor. I did the maths for my video on spinning, but it is really intensive work. That's why before the invention of the automated spinning wheels, women spun. And I don't mean peasant women spun or women often spun. I mean all women spun pretty much all the time, because there was such a huge constant need for threads, right? There was legislation in some of the Italian city-states that women couldn't bring their little trundle spinning wheels and go sit in the square and spin, because there were so many of them, right? So you need to think about what your level of automation is, because at the beginning, as I say, nothing is automated, right? So when you take flour, okay, you take grain. So you've just harvested your wheat and you now want to make it into grain so that you can make bread out of it. Somebody has to sit there with a mortar and pestle in a stone, pestle, maybe a very big one, not the little ones we have today, and grind the flour by hand. They have to physically do this, right? And grind the flour. And then the water wheel came along. and the water wheel allowed them to do that grinding motion by attaching it to the river. So you've got your wheel going through the river and it's pounding the wheat, and that then creates your flour. Um, yeah, the Romans absolutely had a water wheel. If they could do it, wizards absolutely can. Like the water wheel was invented way back when. It is way older than you think. And it was our first piece of automation. And it automated, obviously, food is a big thing to automate, right? The more automated your food is, the kind of better people can eat in general. And so the less effort it obviously is to feed, the more you gain from the calories you eat. So it is really worth thinking about your level of automation for things like food and clothing and so on. Like, where are your people on the automation journey of creating the technology of your world? And I just want to bring up an interesting point about the water wheel and the ancients and so on. There was a guy called, oh, I speak under massive correction, Heliot, something like that, an Egyptian dude. Okay. And this Egyptian guy invented a steam engine. Now, it wasn't our kind of steam engine. Obviously, it wasn't attached to an internal combustion engine. It didn't have a train and so on. But it did have two little, like, rotating things, and it did take heat in, and it did generate the spinning motion from there. And they and he, I mean, it was only a curiosity because, as I say, it didn't have anything really to attach it to. But he built one. Okay, there was one in ancient Egypt. It fell into disuse because it didn't nothing. There was none of the supporting technology to generate a industrial revolution at that time, right? The industrial revolution isn't just a case of like plonk a steam engine down. You need everything else around it. You need the steel, and you need trains, and you need like the boats, and you need all kinds of other technology around it. But yes, yes, hero of Alexandria, Eliophile. Thank you. You are 100% correct. That guy. Yeah, so they thought it was a gimmick because there wasn't any other technology to work with it, right? And that's an important thing to consider. Like, even if somebody does invent something staggering, unless there's supporting technology, it probably just dies like a gimmick, right? It needs the supporting technology to grow. Um, yes. um, so absolutely automation. That is basically my key thing. So I would really think about your key element here being, where are your people on the automation journey? How much of food production have they automated? How much of clothing have they automated? And clothing, man, clothing is such a thing. Okay. If you are pre-spinning wheel in your world, so not pre-spinning wheel, because your spinning wheel is probably invented, pre-automated spinning. Okay, you're at the point where human beings spin on a spinning wheel or a drop spindle. Someone in your world is spending a hell of a lot of time creating threads, like a serious amount of time doing that thread creation. And now you can go a lot of ways with that. You can automate it via spiders or whatever, but it is an interesting part of world building. In your cultures, who spins? Who are the people that generate this, and where would people see them? Would they see them in city squares? Would they see them in inns? It's a very interesting thought. Like, where is all of this pre-automation work happening? And then besides automation, the other big technology that you want to think about is your medical technology. Okay, so medical technology is so Pablo says, so defining the access technology. Yes. Yeah. So The thing about medical technology is we obviously started out with like very, the knowledge of like the humors, and we bled people and all kinds of shenanigans. I remember when I was doing research for the video that I did on healing technology, I read about what President Garfield's doctors did to him as part of, so President Garfield, the American president, got shot, and um, his doctors try to keep him alive. And wow, I mean, they put that poor man through such hell, like seriously. And that wasn't that long ago, right? Our medical technology is a very slow advancement if you get right down to it. And that's just because, you know, advancing in medical technology is hard, because a lot of what is happening that'll make people ill, at the base level, is like things that you can't see easily, like germs. You know, until you get germ theory, you have a limited understanding of how diseases spread. And you think it's things like humors or bad water or things like that. I mean, people believe that bad water spread malaria because the mosquitoes who spread malaria occurred near water. So you need to think about, you need to look back at those kinds of superstitions if you are pre-germ theory in in the medical world, right? Never mind viruses and all the rest of that. That gets like way later. But just germ theory. Also, like, it is somewhat of a myth that our ancestors had no conception that they needed to wash and be clean. Like, people knew that dirt in wounds created death. They knew that it made the wound go sour. And we had soap for ages. People absolutely washed their hands, washed wounds, all the rest of that, because it's a thing you can see. You can see a wound getting gangrene. And fire, of course, also gives you soap. Just on a side note, um, if you have ashes, if you have a wood burning fire and you pour water through it, you immediately get lye water, right? And lye water will clean a lot of things. It'll clean your glass if you have soot on your glass. That's what I use it for. I have a wood burning fireplace as part of the heating strategy for my house. So you take some water, you take some wood ash, you mix it up, and it cleans glass sparkly clean. Anyway, side note there. Yeah, absolutely. Even Galen said, wash your hands. Everybody knew to wash their hands before sticking their fingers into a wound. It's a myth. This, like, that people didn't know they should wash their hands or whatever. They might not have bathed as regularly as we would think, but they certainly weren't like living in filth and thinking that it's a great idea. Um, okay, so we've spoken about automation, we've spoken a bit about fire, we've spoken about the medical thing. Let's talk about the printing press. Okay, so, well, let's really talk about information, of which the printing press is one of the big technological strategies. So, how does information get spread in your world, not just by word of mouth, but from city to city and from generation to generation, right? So, if you think about the changes that the printing press made to our world, it basically democratized knowledge. Because before this, and again, it's part of that automation journey, right? Before the printing press, how were books duplicated? If you had a book and you want to give somebody else a copy, some human has to sit there with a pen and write that book over again. They had scriptoriums where monks would sit and copy the books that the church wanted to preserve, right? And so it was enormously expensive, because even if you pay the scribes almost nothing, and let's be honest, you weren't going to pay them almost nothing because people who could read and write were fairly rare. But even if you paid the scribes almost nothing, it is still a human being that has to be paid enough to eat, and that makes it long and slow and expensive. The same as clothing. The reason why clothing was so expensive before the automated spinning invention and the automated looms and weaving and so on, is because it took so long to spin the threads, and that labor makes it incredibly expensive. Okay, so books were really expensive. Then the printing press comes along, and you can churn out copies of books. I mean, it's not as fast as we can do it today, but it was hella improvement on a human sitting in a scriptorium and copying it. And so the books became much more readily accessible. Reading and writing obviously lifted because there was now something to read. Before this, even if a peasant knew how to read, where would they use the skill? Books were items of treasure, written by hand, illustrated by hand. I mean, it was impossible for somebody normal to get their hands on a book. It was a noble's item, it was a rich person's item. And so the printing press did that, and that changed the world. I mean, the printing press, okay, so there are multiple reasons why the Reformation happened, the European Reformation, the Christian Reformation. But certainly the printing press contributed, because Luther said you should read your own Bibles and you shouldn't have the priests say to you what the Bible says. And that was a marked departure from Catholic doctrine. But it also was possible to say that because the Bible was now so well printed that people could have their own Bibles. And as such, they could actually read the Bible by themselves and not just listen to what the priest said. So it changed everything. That, and I mean, if you look at today, right, at our life today, how much changed because of the television, the radio, the internet. Oh my good Lord, the internet, right? It is the control of information changes your society. It has a dramatic impact on your society. Like television made it easier to send information out, right? But when the internet came, it made it that anybody could be on TV, right? I mean, this is what YouTube is basically, right? It's an everybody platform. Um, and so the gatekeepers have lost the narrative. They've lost control of the ability to kind of gatekeep the narrative. And because of that, our society is undergoing this massive change that I guess we're all struggling with to some extent, to some greater or lesser extent, to understand like how what we consume, how to determine what we consume as being factual and non-factual, and trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and so on. So it is well worth thinking about how information in your world is controlled or not controlled, right? Is there a printing press? Can people readily read books, even if they had the skill? Let's assume everybody is born knowing how to read, right? Now, consider, is there anything for them to read, or are books very, very, very expensive? Um, and and if they can read, if information is readily available, how does that change their society and their culture? And again, here, don't get stuck on our world. Like I love the printing press. I love everything about it, but consider the consider magical possibilities, right? Maybe you have a magical means of communication that brings something like radio to your civilization long before they would have had a printing press, right? So they might have, through magic, means of communication, of transmitting information well before they would have it in normal technology. And then their culture would quite dramatically change, because now you have this reliable information sharing mechanic. And that means that ideas can connect and talk to each other, and ideas can build on each other. And you start getting an acceleration of technology and or magic or whatever, that people can build on, because people bring together multiple ideas. If you look at the Silk Road, right? The Silk Road kind of was at its height during the Islamic Golden Age, when the Islamic nations were like they were all over science and mathematics and everything, right? They were doing experiments. They were deep into alchemy. They were doing math, like it was incredible, but um, they were connected. All those cities were connected via the Silk Road. So what was happening was merchants would take ideas and letters from one town to the next, right? So people could communicate their ideas with each other. And this intermingling of ideas up and down the Silk Road was one of the big drivers of the Islamic Golden Age. And then when the Portuguese sailed around the edge of India and discovered the sea route to around Africa first and then India, but discovered the sea route to the east via the end of Africa. The Silk Road started to fall into disuse. Towns became abandoned. The Silk Road itself became abandoned, and gradually that scientific-driven Islamic Golden Age started to decline as people were no longer exchanging ideas. Ideas build best when they can talk to other ideas. So bear that in mind when you're building the technology of your world. Like, how people communicate and what level their communication is at will make a dramatic difference to your world. Glacius Maniac says, my wizards basically magic scribes, so the printing press is a point of tension for them. Yeah, I mean, that could be a very interesting approach as well. Mages are your Luddites. Down with the printing press, down. Pratchett did the magical telegraph. Yep. Alex says a lot of Arab knowledge is taken from somewhere else. Alex, a lot of everyone's knowledge is taken from somewhere else. I mean, we all build, knowledge is built layer on layer on layer, right? There was knowledge built by the Hittites that then went to the Egyptians, and from the Egyptians to the Greek, and from the Greeks to the Romans, and then to the Arabs, and then from the Arabs back into Europe. Like, we build knowledge is not this or that or the other thing. It's build one on top of the other. And it's an exchange. It's in the exchange of ideas that our knowledge really flourishes and grows. So yeah, I mean, certainly, like, obviously the Arabs took a lot from the classical civilizations. So did everyone else. That is just, it's the nature of knowledge. Yeah, a lot of the Greek knowledge came to them. Exactly, that's what I was saying. Like, the Greeks got from the Cretes, and the Cretes got from the Egyptians, and the Egyptians got from the, you can take it back all the way. It just builds. Yeah, and that brings me to generational knowledge transfer and books. Books are good for generational knowledge transfer, and this is a question you should answer in your world. How is knowledge transferred generation to generation, right? Is it through books? Is it through magic? Is it through stone tablets? Is it word of mouth? The problem with word of mouth is it's a very, very fragile chain. If you kill the knowledge keepers in one generation, you lose all that knowledge to the next generation, right? And that's a very quick way to apocalypse. So, and that's why it tends to be when a culture reaches the point where their generational knowledge transfer is via books, that they become exponentially faster in developing technology because they have a much more reliable means of transmitting that generation to generation um, knowledge. So consider that when you are when you're doing your cultures, is how do they transfer knowledge between generations. Roget says to the medical technology aspect, Neil deGrasse Tyson in an interview said how Muslims caught less diseases because they have to wash 5 times a day. Yeah, I mean, I can see that as a reason. I would also say that there's probably some environmental factors. You know, the European cities tended to be colder, so people tend to like huddle inside their houses, whereas um, the Arab areas is naturally warmer, it's more windy, so it's less environmentally friendly to certain diseases. Not all diseases, obviously, but to certain diseases. And I'm certain that the washing hands would have made a difference. Pretty sure. I also heard, I cannot speak for the veracity of this, but I did hear somewhere that the Black Plague cemented the kind of anti-Semitism that ran rife in Europe at one point, because Jews, because they also lived very much like on hand washing and before every meal and so on. Um, they didn't get the plague as much, so they were cleaner, and they didn't get the plague as much. And so people started saying it's witchcraft and it's this and that and the other thing, and of course actually it's just living cleaner. Yeah. um but yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. also also didn't murder cats who ate rats randomly. Yeah, there's that. So um Then let's talk about military technology. Okay. Um, so military technology is all the ways we can think of to kill each other at the large scale. So, and it starts obviously with simple things. So I think that one of the most underrated weapons in fantasy is the sling. So we have invented some amazing slings over the years. Like there are slings that you use on a staff that you can absolutely 100% kill a man with, and a sling reloads really fast. There were ancient Greek and Roman battles where they used slingers, where they spoke about how good the slingers were and how devastating they were. And then, of course, slings, bows and arrows and so on. And then that leads you to your trebuchets. Yep, your trebuchets and your big machines. All right. Now, those big machines um, are. I did a video on them, but they're basically. I mean, the Romans had massive scorpion machines. They had siege towers. They had big military equipments, right? It is well worth studying Roman equipment if you are interested in military technology, in terms of creating your technology level for your world, because they will show you the level to which we could have been, to which we were at 2,000 years ago. So you can easily, if the Romans had it, you can include it in your fantasy kind of thing. So And I mean, during the Middle Ages, we kind of went balls with the siege equipment. People built catapults that could throw boulders the size of a house. Um, so don't be shy of creating your military technology, your equipment, and so on. And under military technology, of course, is guns. Now, bear in mind, we've had guns since like the 13th century. I think was the first hand cannon in Europe. I think the Chinese had the wood barrel guns. I speak under correction, but it might have been as early as the 5th century, where they shot out of a bamboo tube. Um, of course, these are very basic guns. They're nothing, they're not like a rifle or anything like that. But you can have black powder weapons and you can have them early in fantasy without breaking out into like full blown muskets and the like. Um, so don't be shy about that. Misty asks, would smithing be the same in a world of pyromancers? So this is actually a really interesting question, and one that I have sat with before when I thought about elemental magic. And I think if the pyromancers had tight control over their fire, like they could control the heat, the direction, and so on, so they could make like a sustained heat burst. I think in such a case, your smithing would actually improve dramatically and faster, because in that case, your pyromancers would be able to make steel faster. For example, you wouldn't be restricted to like the type of fuel that you have for your fire and so on, or the kiln you can build, the kind of stoking thing you can build, and so on. So I would, if I were building a full elemental system with pyromancers, I would certainly consider moving smithing up quite high on the list, and maybe combining smithing with pyromancy as like a combo of craftsman and mage. Um, Then yeah, I mean, gunpowder. There's some chatter going on in the live stream. Gunpowder absolutely is a big deal. And like somebody said there in passing, that there was like the bomb that they used in the movie of Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, to blow up Helm's Deep. Absolutely, you can have such a black powder weapon without having guns, because guns, obviously, I mean, they change the dynamic of the battlefield a lot, because they're kind of a democratizing weapon, because you don't need strength per se to wield them. And I get that. So you might not want to go the full hog, but you can have bombs and hand grenades and stuff like that made with black powder that can give you that kind of explosive force without going the whole hog and having like muskets or whatever. Um, Yes, pyromancers could certainly supercharge both smithing, and they could generate advanced fantasy metals. Like maybe you could have a type of metal that can only be forged in a pyromancer's fire, because it requires the special heat, and you need to eat a ham sandwich while you're smithing this thing, and so on and so forth. And it then becomes this thing that the pyromancers churn out. Or if you want to go dark, the Smiths have enslaved the pyromancers and control them through some MacGuffin. And up with the pyromancers, free the pyromancers, justice for fire, that kind of thing. Yeah, the black powder bomb is absolutely an artifact for the movies. In the book, Saruman just fireballed it. That's true. I liked the movie edition, though. I think that bomb was a really good addition, honestly. Um, JR says, I'm building a world where the cultures are in the Bronze Age. Chariots are about the highest level I can think of. So chariots, to be fair, are actually quite awesome. I've been doing a lot of research into the Hittite Empire for Sangwheel Tales, my next book series. And I'm basing one of the empires of the Hittite Empire, but advancing them to our kind of day and age, or not our day and age, my world's day and age. And as part of that, I did a lot of research into chariots, and I mean, they were kick-ass technology, military technology. They were like tanks. Um, they were competent because they could dominate the field of battle. You could have two dudes with weapons on it, plus the driver. Plus, you can equip the horses with like gear to make them more dangerous on the field. Plus, you can equip the actual chariot itself with like spikes and gears and like armor and stuff like that for people to hide behind. So you can do a lot with chariots. So I actually still have my people on chariots because none of the animals on their continent are capable of bearing their weight. But I have them. I have so so I have them. The chariots being pulled by like giant terror birds. Right. I have terror birds surviving, and I made them domesticatable. But they're not really good for riding because their balance isn't quite correct. So they still have the chariots and the carts and so on. And yeah, so I think chariots are awesome. Yes, sure, you need a road and a fairly flattish surface for them, and horses have got their advantages in terms of the hills and so on, and rockier terrain. But still, I like chariots. I think they're awesome. But the Bronze Age also did have trebuchets and quite good vessels. Some of the Phoenicians had some really kick-ass seagoing vessels that you can include in your Bronze Age thing, with like rams on the front and trimarines, 3 banks of oars, so they could work up quite a speed. They had long oars that they could shoot forward with. And it's worth thinking about your seagoing, your navigation technology as well, especially like a compass. Do your people have a compass yet? Can they determine latitude and longitude? I was sitting with this when I was doing research for Sangwheel Tales, because so you can do I could do the one longitude. Yeah, longitude I could do. But I was sitting with the other one because I have a seagoing nation, and I'm like, okay, but I need to figure out latitude, but I don't have a clock. I don't have like a Greenwich Mean Time worthy clock. So I need other ways to figure this out. So I sat for ages figuring out different ways to calculate latitude and how they can do it with the clocks that they have. I came up with an alchemical clock device, sort of. It's not as accurate as our clock devices, but it's a solid way. So think about your seagoing people, especially in terms of navigation. Where are they currently with their navigation technology? Do they have a compass, a sextant, a timekeeper? Can they do latitude? Can they do longitude? If they can do latitude, I think it's latitude, then what is their Greenwich Mean Line? What is the starting point line that they measure with across the time zones? Those are all really important questions to think about if you have a seagoing culture. Roget says Greek fire. Yes, Greek fire was amazing. Alchemy is amazing. Alchemy is a lot of fun to get into. I did quite a lot of that with Sangwheel Tales as well. It's got it's the because alchemy isn't just about the chemistry. Yes, in part it's the chemistry and the understanding of chemicals, so you can bring a kind of more scientific approach to it. But alchemy is also about balance, right? What you put in, you get out, and that whole Naruto mechanic is actually is actually at the core of alchemist as well, of alchemy as well, and alchemy, the mystical side of it, which is very interesting. Tanky says chariots are cool. You can have them drawn by different beasts, and you can have them drawn by cats and so on. Absolutely, chariots are kick-ass. I love them. I think they're great. Okay, so we have spoken about printing press, the compass, agriculture, the wheel, sewer system. Anybody want to talk about the sewer system? I don't know why I put that on the list. I must have been nuts. Sewer systems are kind of important though, because, obviously you need to control the flow of your waste and your waste management. And you need to and it's important for a city, because without it, your waste kind of heaps up. It's actually interesting. So on that topic, we have domesticated pigs twice, and they undomesticated when we stopped having big cities after the Bronze Age collapse with the sea people. And there's speculate this is speculation, but there's speculation that the reason why we stopped focusing on pigs is because they eat garbage. And without the cities, we didn't have the ready supply of garbage, and there was no reason to keep the pigs around. So interesting that you can use animals in that way um, for garbage collection and so on. Yeah, a lot of cultures threw their garbage into the river, and it carried it away. Misty, I'm going to get to glass making, so I'll put that there. And the garbage just carried it all away, by river, and it wasn't so great for anybody downriver, but it was fantastic for them at the top. I just briefly want to talk about glass making. Misty, I actually have a video about glass making because I love glass making. I think the whole process of making glass is amazing, and I think glass is a way underrated technology in fantasy. So if that is your specific interest, go check out Just in Time Worlds, like the back videos, and you'll find glass in there. You'll find like a whole section on glass for fantasy world builders. Um, yeah, so sewers. Hey, Katie, how you doing? So yeah, sewers and sanitation is actually important. There was there's a book called The Sleeping Dragon by Joel Rosenberg, which is a kind of a lit RPG before lit RPG was cool. It's really fun. I really enjoy it. Can highly recommend. But there, the mages had a sewer system where they'd enslaved a young dragon, and they forced the dragon to live inside this like pit. And then all of the sewage of the city went to the pit, and the dragon would flame the sewage in order to, keep its home as fresh as possible. And that made for a very effective, if extremely cruel, sewage system. So yeah, you could do that. You could do that kind of a sewage system, or you can do a Romanesque type of sewage system where you have aqueducts and sewage tunnels and so on that leads into a river that takes it away. Or you could go like our more modern approach, which is sewage treatment. So the sewage is in some way treated for uh, for for either use in agriculture or to be returned to the wild, etc., etc. But whenever you have a big town, somebody will have thought of sewage, because if you don't, disease will rip through that town like nothing else. Okay, it will be depopulated faster than a wood town will burn. Um, so Yeah, we can see really advanced bathrooms in the Minoan era civilization. We can see advanced sewage systems in the Bronze Ages, in the Bronze Age cities, pre the fall of the Bronze Age and the coming of the Sea People and so on. These people understood the need to manage sewage systems, and they had in place technology for it, structure for it. They knew how to utilize it and how to make it into agricultural fodder, and how to move it out of their cities. So don't get trapped in like a every city had rivers of sewage flowing through it before the modern era. That's simply not true. People did think about sewage systems quite extensively, and you can see some of the sewage systems in some of the European cities. There are still tunnels of like the ancient, the old sewage systems coming from even from the Middle Ages and so on. So it's well worth thinking about waste management within cities if you have big cities, because it also can potentially breed all kinds of fun plot elements. So I just spoke about the Jewel Rosenberg one, right? But I mean, sewage systems also create tunnels, and tunnels create adventure possibilities. It creates places to explore. It creates places where secrets can be stored. It creates places where the insurgents can crawl through the tunnels and blow up Parliament, or whatever they're going to do. So, so think about your sewage systems, what they were like before, and what artifacts that have left for your current people, and how that can influence your culture and your story, and how it can create a richness in that environment. And what you really want to think about is you want to think about how is water kept clean, how is human waste moved, and and by human waste I mean the stuff that comes out our bodies, and how is like food waste and so on moved, because those are kind of different things, right? And then also think about how is water brought into the home. Like, is there a centralized pipe, like a pump that people go to pump? Is there water pumped into the house? And so on. And remember, a pump doesn't have to be electric to work. You can have pumps working on water wheel principles. You can have pumps working on magic principles. You can do all kinds of things with pumps that don't require electricity. Um, yeah, absolutely. You can create fertilizer with human waste. Absolutely. Like, it does not have to be a case of like it just goes into the river or whatever. Um, Yeah, pumps can also be good old-fashioned muscle power and a lever as well. Absolutely. So, you can have all kinds of different kinds of pumps that get water into your city and out of your city, and that move sewage around as well. Um, so it is worth thinking about how your water moves, how your sewage moves, and so on within a city. Um, Very true. There is no point to having a sewer if you don't have a single hydra in it. What is wrong with you? Where's your hydras? Um, Glacier says the sewer system was how my character snuck into the city when the city walls were guarded. Yep, that's a classic D&D tray there. I am having a great day. Thanks, Sander. My writing is complete. I have just today finished recording Sangwheel Chronicles Book 4 in full. So it is actually live. So I'm very pleased with myself. I think, however, that this is about as much of live streaming as my voice can take, given that I've spent the last week talking straight into the microphone um, for 20 hours worth of recording for my monster book. But yeah, book 4 of Sangwheel Chronicles is complete. It is out on Amazon, or it should be in a couple of hours. And yeah, so I am series complete. 600,000 words under the belt. Um, yes, sewers are also places where wildfire pots can be kept, as we all saw in Game of Thrones when the whole freaking building went up in flames. That was a really great scene. That season sucked, but that scene was so good. It was such a good scene. Um, Thanks. Thanks for the congrats. Yeah, Alex, it does. Underwater does change it. So underwater, I would focus on chemistry technology. So I would focus on how chemicals can interact with each other, especially with things like chemos. I'd start with chemosynthesis, what generates energy underwater. Then I'd work with underground volcanoes for a heat source, and then I'd consider, things like how do you combine chemical elements underwater to create the equivalent technology, the equivalent kind of things to our technology. But yeah, underwater, of course, changes your technology dramatically. I do have I've got a whole little mini series on underwater. I think there might be a playlist for it, but I speak under correction. So yeah. Um, Yeah, that sounds like a Pratchett thing. It sounds like a Pratchett thing, having goblin poop as a sought after commodity. And yeah, Alex, I definitely think hydraulics would be a good way. Um, you can have a bunch of can have necromancers in your sewage system as well. You don't have to have hydras, you can also have necromancers, or you can have hydras and necromancers, and that would be awesome. So um, yeah, so that was my little bit rambling conversation about tech in fantasy world, and the important parts, or the things that I think are important. So my overall take on it is, think about automation. Always think about automation. Think about um, think about your control of fire. Always think about your fire, your control of information, um, automation in general, your military technology, and your medical technology, and then your sewage and navigation. Navigation, very important. So, um, if you keep those in mind, if you keep those 7 kind of factors in mind, I think you will do well with your technology for your fantasy world. Um, so. Well, I mean, magical healing is fine. It does mean so the thing about magical healing, the reason why I'm so down on it is not because I feel that it removes stakes or anything like that. It's that it changes the society so much, right? If people don't die, well, if they don't fear disease, and they don't fear wounds, and women don't die in childbirth and so on, your entire cultural dynamic changes. And so it it seems easy to do, but it has such a dramatic downstream effect that it actually results in you rebuilding the society almost from the ground up, because of these dramatic changes in like the medical um equivalent. 100% Miath. I figured that you might have accounted for it. I'm just saying, I wouldn't call having healing be a lazy technology, because I actually think that if you include magical healing in your world, you create a lot more world building, because now you have to think for like the whole change from society, from the bottom up, um, how you change your society to account for that. Um, so yeah. Um, okay. Well, it was, as always, an absolute pleasure to hang out with you guys. Um, it's been a fun hour. Um, and that is such a good point, actually. Um, if nobody ever develops resistance to a disease but has magic healing, the society would be rampant with diseases that require constant magical healing. But yeah, it changes a lot. It changes a lot if you have magical healing. So, just think about it when you include it. Yep. Great hanging out with you all. Fantastic to see you. Great to see you, Katie, as part of the live stream. And I will see you again for another one soon. And yeah, oh, it's Tuesday. Tuesday, there is like the Empire series starting, which I think is very cool. So look out for that. And sign up for my newsletter if you haven't yet. The first one will be going out this week, and it will include some extra world building stuff. It won't just be what I'm doing, it'll actually have like some articles from me about world building and so on. So thanks, guys. Have a great weekend and chat to you soon. Bye.